This is Human Development, Chapter 9, and I will do a very brief overview of what's happening in this chapter. We will be talking about growth patterns at first, and there is a growth spurt during middle childhood, and they grow much more quickly from age 6 to 12. Boys and girls are going to gain about 2 inches per year. Sometimes there are problems physically if a child grows several inches in 1 year. It takes a bit to keep up, to the body, the rest of the tissues to keep up. 4 to 6-year-olds need 1,400 calories to 1,800 calories a day, which is a considerable amount for the size that they are. Not everyone gains in height and weight just like everybody else. You can see from this table that females in the African American, European American, and those two groups are more obese than males, and then Asian Americans and Latin Americans, more of the males are obese. And each people group tends to have their own DNA and also cookbooks. So if you think of specific foods that people eat, then that might give a little better understanding of why that people group has the where they are in that ratio. Why do people become overweight? Well, heredity is not even 20%, not nearly 20% in this category. Heredity, if you have a child who's over 100 pounds by the time they start kindergarten, this, is a hereditary problem. If through the generations, a family, the ones with the gene tend to gain an excruciating amount, a painful amount of weight during adolescence, and then each time they're pregnant, toddlerhood's another problematic time, then that is genetic and hormonal. Those times in life are when hormones are in flux, they're changing. And so this is a genetic predisposition to succumb to the hormones. Consumption of sugary drinks and less healthful food. Sugar does spike insulin. When insulin is spiked, the body tends to respond eventually by becoming insulin resistant. But even day to day before that, the body is going to tend to put on fat because of the sugar intake. And we know now this is the end of May, beginning of June in 2023. We know that diet drinks do not help with weight loss. And they are going to spike insulin for a lot of people, the same as a sugary drink diet and sugary, the same for most people. There are people who, well, no one is successfully using them for weight loss, let's just say. Advertising of fattening foods. The whole world has trouble with advertising, except you and me. Now, I know me, and you know you, and we don't succumb to advertising. It's only those other people. But advertising works, or they wouldn't be paying millions of dollars, the companies that want to sell things that ought not to be consumed. Fat-free potato chips, how'd this happen? But yeah, advertising, it does work. And it is a problem, especially for children, young adults. Lack of regular physical activity. Students and instructors who sit at a desk all day, and then they're too tired to do much after that. Sometimes working a couple of jobs. I know a lot of my students work a job or two besides going to school. And so there's, you know, maybe a restriction of physical activity, limited access to healthy, affordable foods. First off, you have to determine what is affordable, what is healthy. So if you really, truly know what's healthy, then if it costs more money, it's just saved money from taking off work and getting a surgery done later. Maybe you don't need that coronary bypass surgery in your 50s because you ate well through your 30s and 40s. But not all food is priced the same. There's a big flux going on about what food we have access to and what foods are just not available anymore. Think of all the varieties of banana that are not available, and we get one or two. And that's the way it is with all foods. We're only getting a very narrow spectrum of food that would be beneficial to us. So it's a little harder to have a good variety. Lack of breastfeeding. Breastfeeding is key. Children who were breastfed as infants, they're going to be less apt to be overweight, and adults also who were breastfed. This breastfeeding inoculates the gut, the thought to be sterile gut prior to the passage through the birth canal or the vagina. But that bacteria from the vagina and from the mother's breast help to seed the gut to be able to maintain a healthier weight than if a person is using bottles, sterile bottles, and milk that does not have the bacteria and other microbes in it that the mother's milk has. Different milk and lack of exposure to the microbes. Television and other media, this we're back to advertising. Sometimes children will they'll buy into, so to speak, a social contagion. So many upper class white females had anorexia for a while. Think Karen Carpenter. Well, a lot of people were following her, and this particular people group was more susceptible to buying into being anorexic, and the body actually responded. Television and other media. Social media has a great influence over children, especially during those many months that we were locked down, when we were not driving where we wanted to drive and going to school and having after school events. So a higher concentration of social media and Netflix and everything that can come across a device. Children have responded and copied, emulated the people that they're around. Think of the boba experiment that you wrote about in Psych 101. And they copy and they emulate what they see. So in the media, if the media glorifies, so to speak, smoking, the old black and whites, tobacco's not the same as it was back then. And children tend to try out things that they see others do. And these also are social contagions, making decisions about their life and choosing paths that they've seen and that their friends are choosing. And so this is cool, so to speak. It's cool. So this is what they're going to do. And they do it the same as all of their friends. Television and other media. Overweight children, a lot of time they are rejected by their peers. It may be a source of derision. They may have difficulty making friends if they are the fat one, okay? especially ladies, the young girls, they want to be in the cool crowd. They want to be in the cool group. And if you're in the group that can all go to the bathroom together, then you've been invited in. But if you're obese, you're probably not going to be invited in. You probably don't even fit the clothing that these girls wear. There's a greater risk of health problems throughout life when obesity is a problem. Heart disease, diabetes, and then quite a few types of cancer. Think every pound of fat adds 2 miles of capillary circulation. And the heart has to pump the blood through that extra 2 miles for every pound of fat that's added. Now, if a person loses weight after a time, then the circulation is going to be able to back off a little bit. There's a lot that is said about when you gain weight, you gain fat cells. When you lose weight, the fat cells just shrink, and to a large degree that's true, but the fat cells will finally be sent out if you continue on that same path of losing weight and it stays for a few years. Exercise. Well, exercise profits a little. It's not everything. To exercise and expend enough calories to eat the M&Ms, it's not going to balance out. So I'm going to have this large pack of M&Ms or a small one, and then I'm going to take the calories from the back and say, okay, this is how long I need to run on the track. It doesn't take the toxins back out of your body. So exercise is good in a sane amount. You want to keep moving. You want to keep your range of motion. You want dexterity to still be good. It does reduce the risk of heart disease, stroke, diabetes, and cancer, certain types. Self-esteem and self-image and ability to cope with the problems that come in life. This is all going to be improved with movement and exercise. Aerobic exercise helps the heart muscle. A project that you can do that I have noted below, you can see this. If you would like to design a physical education class for 8-year-olds. Disorders that affect learning. We have more now than we had a decade ago, 50 years ago, and 100 years ago. Some people will say, affirm, they even dogmatically, that there's no difference in our children, but we're diagnosing differently. Maybe we pay attention more to the criteria for diagnosing, and that's why we have so many students with learning disabilities. I disagree. I disagree wholeheartedly. Something is different with the students themselves. It's not like we were ignorant and unable to write down, and history shows this. Read I'll tell you what it is later. Blue book I just got, Spiral, having to do with the mind and the body. They communicate well together. We've known these things, and the statistics in that book bear out that the DSM-3, DSM-4, all around those times, and we're in the DSM-5 now, but during that time, we had symptoms that we were paying attention to. We just diagnosed them a little bit differently. So to have excessive inattention, ADHD, you do need to remember this. Excessive inattention, impulsivity, complete lack of self-control, and hyperactivity. This, when it is significant enough to impair function in school, it can be diagnosed. What we believe the cause to be is a lack of executive control of the brain over motor and more primitive functions. So, lack of control, a lack of executive control of the brain. The executive center of the brain is in the frontal lobe. You do need to remember that. One student said it felt like there was a beehive in his head, in his mind. How he knew to say that, I don't know. Maybe this was a situation where it came and went with him and it wasn't constant. ADHD is going to occur by age 7 almost always. It's diagnosed in way, way more. It's right around 10% now of school-age children. And you need to remember that it's more common in boys than girls. Think testosterone. Testosterone is a more assertive hormone than estrogen. So the testosterone children are going to be more active and even more rebellious. So they're going to act out more than the estrogen people. Is that a problem? Not really. We must have testosterone people to slay the dragons and kill the snakes. This has to be done by somebody. Estrogen people do not do well with slaying dragons. Hyperactivity, restlessness. And these are all part of the picture for an ADHD child. There are some films below that you can access and watch at some point. Treatment of ADHD, we usually use stimulants to do this. They increase the activity of the nervous system. Effective with ADHD, they promote activity of the brain chemicals dopamine and noradrenaline. These stimulate the executive center of the brain to help control the primitive areas of the brain. The thought is they'll be able to not act out so much. Another thing that you need to remember about ADHD is that it is overdiagnosed. It's overdiagnosed, and the supposition by our curriculum is that sometimes students are diagnosed with ADHD when they, in fact, have behavior problems. There is no blood test to test for ADHD. And all of these symptoms may be a result of not learning to be self-controlled, not having any self-discipline. And self-discipline and self-control, this needs to be done before the child is 4. If a child is socially an outcast at 4, this is a very, very bad sign. They need to be caused to be, led to be, helped to be a good citizen, a likable person. If they're not likable by 4, it's going to be rough for the child, rough for the parents and the school and anyone that is associated with that child that hasn't learned to play fair, so to speak, and be nice. Learning disabilities. They're not able to develop specific academic language and speech skills. Dyslexia or dyslexia is a reading disorder. The person with dyslexia is going to read much slower and have a lower comprehension than a person who does not have dyslexia. They will perform below the level expected. for their age and for their intelligence. They'll perform lower. There's no evidence of other handicaps to be able to make this diagnosis. If there are other handicaps, then the diagnosing criteria will change a little. If they have an intellectual disability, that's a whole different diagnosis. Socioeconomic disadvantage, this is brought up for a lot of diagnoses. A person who's in a low socioeconomic level, it's going to be harder for them. The mother's gone to work. The mother's not home with the child, teaching the child to read. The mother is not, or the father is not, helping the child through math and whatever else the child's level is before and after school, even after school starts. So there's a great disadvantage when there's not a stay-at-home parent. I said that. A lot of people will say, well, it's a mom's right and it's a dad's right to work. Of course it is. Your child still does not have the advantages that a stay-at-home parent would have. All right, quality time and quantity time. You can't say, oh, it's going to be quality time and it's going to be 5 minutes a week. Doesn't work. Dyslexic children, they're going to see letters that are upside down or backward, and they're going to confuse these letters that are W and M, B and D, A and O, things like that. All right. Where does dyslexia come from? Sensory and neurological problems. Maybe there's a genetic factor, a neurological or circulation problem, circulation in the mind, in the left hemisphere of the brain. Problems in the angular gyrus. And you can look on a brain map, and find the angular gyrus. Phonological processing, there may be problems with that, and that would impair reading ability. To treat a child with dyslexia, this is going to focus on remediation, highly structured exercises, and this helps the child become aware of how to blend sounds to form words. And when they go through that for a period of time, it'll be easier for them to see the word, remember those blends, and actually say or read the word. Another thing you need to remember is, what is mainstreaming? And mainstreaming is placing the children that are disabled in the mainstream of all of the children who are not disabled, all of them, mainstreaming. Okay, the child who has a learning disability, what I have found in the middle school grades is, instead of having 20 spelling words, they'll give this child who's very challenged, they're going to give the child half the spelling words or a quarter of the spelling words. Is doing less work when you have the handicap, is that going to help you perform as well or succeed in life as well as people who have it easier? And that's not the case. The child who has a harder time learning those spelling words needs extra spelling words. That child needs the spelling words from last week, this week, and next week, and needs to work with all of them, and needs to have extra time to work with them to be able to overcome where they are. If not, then they're going to end up in a very sorry place, not being able to function in life as well as other people function, might not be able to go to college because they just can't pass the tests. Although tests are changing, college entrance tests are changing right now. Moral development. Moral development is key to a good society, key to a well-functioning society. If we think moral development doesn't matter, then we say, oh, well, it doesn't matter if it's under $1,000, like California right now. Under $1,000 you stole, well, there's no prosecuting you because it's just under $1,000. And then how many stores, major chains, large stores have just left the area because the moral depravity to think that you can take from someone else what you did not earn and you're not going to be prosecuted for it, which of course is the truth there. Then if your morality says, oh, well, do what you can get away with, then you've run out the stores that perhaps you could have purchased things from. I think I left the door open too long and got mosquitoes in. It's been wet outside. Cognitive process and judgment. Kids are influenced by the values of the cultural setting that they're reared in. If mother tells the little kid when checking out at Walmart, stick that in your pocket, hide that in your shirt, and these low-level impulse buy items that are candy for kids that height and things like that, the child's learning to be a thief. The child's learning to take from others and not be a giving person and not be a self-sufficient person. So typically there should be a reflection of the orderly and unfolding process of cognitive development. Okay. Moral reasoning is related to the child's overall cognitive development. We start out as very egocentric. That's a psychology word for selfish, self-centered. When the baby is born, the baby cries when the baby doesn't get what the baby needs. And it has to be that way. We want the baby to cry when it's hungry. We want the baby to cry when it's wet. Otherwise, the baby won't be, its needs won't be met. It won't be. And if it doesn't cry, that's indicative of deficiencies. Okay. Deficiencies. Overall cognitive development. A child can't be moral when they're a month old. Can't be moral when they're 3 months old or 6 months old. They still need, when they cry, they need someone to come and say, okay, what do you need? And sort this out. Someone with some ability to figure out what the child needs. They're not going to cry just to cry. And there's no reason to say, oh, they're exercising their lungs. That's good. No, it's not. They'll get enough of that, even if you give the baby what the baby needs, which is what you need to do when the baby cries. On a cognitive level, moral development concerns the basis that kids can make judgments that acts as right or wrong. So in class, we talked about these topics a couple of days ago in class, and my students were reluctant to call anything wrong. I said, I'm stealing your device. Now you don't have a device. You can't do your schoolwork. And I have all your devices. And my students were very reluctant. They said things like, well, I would come to you and very nicely and politely ask you to return it. If we can't say there's right and wrong, then you have to say, well, what was wrong with racism? One of the horrible evils that the United States said we won't have it anymore. We decided we weren't going to have it anymore because it was wrong and it was evil. If nothing's wrong, then we've succumbed to being Darwin's survival of the fittest. And that's all there is. I don't need to help you. I mean, this is even a little further than Ayn Rand or Ayn Rand. Doing things for personal, selfish reasons only. And there's no other reason to do anything but for your own satisfaction. We are more than animals, and we help each other. We go to med school and we go to nursing school so that we can be self-sufficient. We can pay our own way through the world. We can help others in that regard. And then we're also in a place that we can help people live that otherwise would have died. And I know an ICU RN, and he doesn't like it when he has to put too many people in body bags, more than a couple in a week. And it's just really hard on him. But his work is saving people and helping them live and helping them have a good life that otherwise they would have been dead. And that to me is right. And taking the life of someone else while they're alive or killing them, I believe is wrong. So comment below and tell me how wrong that is. Or just give me your thoughts. Kohlberg. Well, I added in that it's not really considered valid by a lot of people. You know, some people still consider it valid, but we'll just skip that. Kohlberg emphasized the importance of viewing the moral world from the perspective of another person. Do as you would be done by. I don't want you flatting my tires or stealing my car. I'm not going to flat your tires just because you were mean to me or steal your car because I can get away with it. Children and adults arrive at yes or no answers for different reasons. We are faced with moral dilemmas, and we progress at different rates. The United States was first, unless there was a tiny country in Africa that some say may have been first, to say slavery is so terrible, we are eliminating it. We're phasing this out, and it's wrong. Other countries took them longer. Same thing with humans. Some children develop more quickly and others more slowly. IQ has to do with this. My granddaughter would say room temperature IQ. But in reality, if your IQ is under 83, the Army can't take you because you just can't cut the mustard, so to speak. You're just not able to do a job and be profitable. It's not going to happen. What is it? About 12% of the US population has an IQ that low, which not in Arizona, but other states, it could be room temperature, to use her phrase. But morality and understanding right and wrong is a higher level of thinking. It doesn't come simply to the simple. All right. Well, a table. You do need to be familiar with these levels. Pre-conventional, early childhood, then conventional, and then post-conventional. And post-conventional is going to begin in adolescence. Think about it takes until a person's 25 for the brain to be finished developing. This makes it hard for a child or even a young adult to make informed decisions when the brain's not really developed yet. We send our young kids out into the service and potentially to to war, and they're quick, and their thoughts are different. And if you sent someone my age to war with my brain completely developed, good or bad as it is, completely developed, and I'm thinking through so many more layers, I would not be good at that. But our youngsters, before the brain's completely developed, they're very good at that. Their hand-eye coordination is amazing. And some of them have great wisdom, and some do not. Okay, pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional. What can a child do at what age? I was reading an article this week that was asserting that a 1-year-old, if they're tugging at the onesie, then that meant that they were trans. If they didn't like that onesie on, and then more at 2 years old and 3 years old, it was very, very advanced concepts that adults would struggle with working through, but attributing them to the behaviors of children, and including those behaviors where you act out and pretend you're a cowboy, you pretend you're an astronaut, you pretend you're this man, or you pretend you're this woman. And this is part of necessary play, absolutely necessary play, so the kids can know their place in the world. They have this open, the world is a safe place, and I'm part of it, and this is who I am. Without that play and the rough and tumble play with the boys, rough and tumble, not craziness that we'll talk about another week, but just plain rough and tumble play, wrestling. That's important for a boy. He learns his boundaries. He learns what he's capable of, and he learns what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. Those things have to happen. And just because he's or she's in rough and tumble play, it doesn't determine they don't have any idea about choosing sex. And the minute we think they do, we've done them a disservice. And the data is now showing that. Okay, a lot of data is coming that addresses that in a way that we haven't been talking about. Intellectual development, creativity, and achievement, very, very important aspects for these young kids. There are theories of intelligence. Sternberg and Gardner's theories of intelligence. There's analytical intelligence. This is your academic ability. Creative intelligence, the ability to cope with novel, unusual, different, unique situations and profit from that experience. And then practical intelligence, adapting to demands of the environment. There's emotional intelligence in this as well, in the practical, and we're adapting to the demands of other people, our boss, our teacher, our students. Yeah. Multiple intelligences, and this has been popular for quite a while. Okay. Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences, there are more. And these are great for children. And then there comes the time when a child has to say, what of these intelligences is going to be useful in making a living, in earning my way through life, in becoming a person who will change the world for the better, and hopefully support at the same time. There are intelligence quotient tests, IQ tests. There are some online. If you decide you want to do an IQ test, some of them are good, some of them are bunk. The Binet-Simon scale will give you mental age. Stanford Binet intelligence scale. And the IQ is going to be the mental age divided by the chronicle age times 100. And this, along with other diagnosing, self-diagnosing from Dr. Google, remember Google is extremely censored, and there's a lot of useless information that's posted just to get clicks. So I would advise caution in selecting the tests that you want to take, and maybe take several of them, not just one. Wechsler scales, school-age children testing. Children's strengths, weaknesses, overall measures of intelligence functioning, intellectual functioning. Culture and culture-free biases. So the IQ tests already have built in them that males and females are neither one handicapped. If you've been in a cultural bubble and maybe you haven't been exposed to intelligent social media, television, maybe you've been in a bubble of not articulating words correctly, not thinking through problems, not having the intellectual experience. Maybe nobody's been reading books for you and helping you with math, your client. But the cultural bias will come from that. Are you new to the United States? Do you not know English very well? And at my age, I remember kindergarten here in the town that I'm in right now. I was not allowed to go because that's my race. Okay. That did not give me a problem with being able to take these tests, but I believe it was designed to help those who were not white to be able to test a little better. Culture-free is a description of a test that does not have cultural biases. The cultural biases have been removed. They don't rely on expressive language. It's been eliminated so that the test is more simple to take. Middle-class children outperform lower-class children. Same thing we talked about before. No one is home with the kids, reading with them and helping them do projects and whatever else comes up in life. Tests do not predict academic success. So there is a drive that can be developed in a child to want to excel in school. Maybe it'll work. Maybe it won't. Some students don't do well academically, but they can sell cars and make 5 times the wages of someone who has a master's degree. This happens. Most psychologists and educational specialists consider IQ tests to be at least somewhat biased against African Americans and members of social classes. I was checking out at a local store, and I was in Tennessee, and I'm standing in line. There were a couple of ladies, a checker and someone that they knew. And they were talking about the fire, and they were talking about the fire in a way that it was something okay. And being an Arizona desert flower, I think a fire, this could burn acres and miles of our forest. But they talked about the fire, and the lady leaves that checked out, and I asked about the fire. Oh, the state fire. The state fire. If you believe that the state fair is the state fire in your mind, how are you going to spell it? It wasn't that many years ago. They did have television, they did have radio, they had cable, they had internet, and they owned and perpetuated their accent. These were white people. If you teach your children about the fire instead of the fair, your children are going to have to learn to spell. It's going to take 5 times the work, because the child is initially going to have to figure out, is this really the way this is spelled? And needs to learn the phonetics. Anyway, people are handicapped because of no parent or guardian, and literally teaching them wrong. And what do? There were things when I was raising my children, and I flat out told people, this and this and this, I should never have done it that way. I should have done it this way, and it would have set my children in a much higher level to start at. But we do what we can, and the next generation does better. Okay. Intellectual disabilities, intellectual functioning, and adaptive behavior. So the person with an intellectual disability has that 70 to 75 IQ. To be able to see and to respond and to learn what behaviors are well received is too much for these people. Intellectually disabled, these are mildly disabled, and they're capable of adjusting to the demands of emotional situations. May take time. Again, mainstreaming is putting the student in the mainstream with what our curriculum says is non-disabled children. I personally think we're on a spectrum. And where do you draw that line of who is more disabled and less disabled, and in what ways? And we have children that are so challenged, and they've passed the IQ test, and yet they're being abused at home and they can't think straight. So, yeah, children with Downs, and this is a chromosomal alteration. And when the chromosomes are patterned to be Down's syndrome, they are moderately intellectually disabled. Some of them, with help, can get married and have a family. And the child may or may not have Downs. So how does it happen, these intellectual disabilities? They may be biological, chromosomal abnormalities, like we just talked about, or genetic disorders, or brain damage. I knew someone that was pulled from his mother with forceps, and it had permanently altered his abilities, his capacity. Cultural, familial disability, a substandard intellectual performance, and this might be from a lack of opportunity, we just talked about that, to acquire knowledge and skills. If you look up, pardon me, the Whitakers, soft white underbelly, the Whitakers, and go to some of the earlier shows that they're in, it'll take just a few minutes and you'll understand what inbreeding does to a family. And this is a genetic, this is a chromosomal problem. that the Whitakers are living through, but their situation gets better and better and better because they're kind of popular. And as people learn about them, they donate money. And so now they have a car and they have a refrigerator, and, can keep their food better, that kind of thing. But theirs is a lack of it's chromosomal and a lack of ability to acquire knowledge and skills back at the beginning. And then now you can see that although some are nonverbal, it's made a big, big difference in their lives. So Whitaker's soft white underbelly, and that's where you would find their family and be able to watch a good example of that. Giftedness. Well, my kids are gifted and your kids are gifted because they're on the honor roll. Giftedness. It's more than excellence on tasks by the intelligence tests. The educator's criteria. Let's read this list. Outstanding abilities, high performance in a specific academic area, and there's creativity, leadership, and a distinction in the visual or performing arts or bodily talents. This is way more than being on the honor roll, which is way less than passing the classes used to be. So the United States, we test way down on the bottom with third world, with developing countries. We're below all of the developed countries in our academics. Look up the statistics and get more than one. Why are our kids testing so very low? Okay, now we say it's because we've missed a couple of years because of the virus pandemic, but we already were low before that happened. And that's something I think as a country, we need to work out. We need to figure out why. Because at least in Arizona, we have school choice. And so the schools have to perform better, or they're going to lose their students to some other school. You can go to charter schools that are private schools with public funding. So my taxes are going to help, yours are going to help. And we have charter schools that are bilingual. So your child can excel as they learn English, or your client's child can excel as they learn English. Lower class American children, yes, their IQ is lower for all the reasons we just talked about. It's important to have plenty of children. It's important to be with those children and not just incessantly leave them with minimum wage workers in a daycare that would rather be playing video games than to look your child in the eye. Grandparents are great to use for raising children productively, constructively. Ethnic attitudes toward education. There is some to that. I know my parents did not have any thought toward college for me. It was not a valuable thing for me to do. They did set me up in business. It's not that they didn't care about me, but college had no part in that picture. There are ethnic attitudes. The first one that comes up in culture and health and these other classes is, well, the Asians, they, have such high standards for their kids that if the kids can't succeed the way the family wants them to honor the family, that the child will commit suicide. That happens, but that doesn't mean that every ethnicity is pushing or holding back, but it happens. So Native American children, they sometimes score below African American and Latin American. There are a lot of reasons for that. We've gone through some of the reasons, and yeah. Creativity is going to help. It's flexibility, ingenuity, and originality. Creative people help solve problems. Creative people need to be allowed to be creative, not sit at a desk all day long. It's hard for testosterone people to just sit at a desk. Stand in a line, be straight, keep your arms to your sides. This does not work for creative people or testosterone people, different reasons, okay? I'm not equating the two. Convergent thinking, finding solutions, best solutions, divergent thinking, free and fluid association to the elements of a problem. All of these are problem solving. These all come from situations. These come from projects, experiences, not necessarily bookwork. Language development and literacy. The brain has to work. Parents need to be involved. 10,000 words should be the vocabulary for a 6-year-old, 7 to 9, semantic sophistication. And then middle childhood, there are subtle advances in articulation and using complex grammar. Children use connectives and can form indirect object, direct object constructions. Why is this important? It's important to not put on a child permanent decisions. Children should not have tattoos. Children in middle childhood should not start smoking, start drinking, we're losing over 300 people a day to fentanyl. Children should not have access to what could permanently change them. That sounds very strong. But as we see, children are not capable of making the best decisions about things that matter. One of them is, consensual sex. So NAMBLA and these other groups, some in our United States government, believe that consensual sex up to a 10-year gap or no age requirements should be allowed. Consensual to a child, a young child, could be, here's the candy. Consensual to someone in middle childhood could be a lot of other things, not candy, but they would be persuaded to make decisions, whether it's a social contagion or whether it's a one-on-one, this is my agenda and don't you agree? It can happen. Enough of that, but it's true. It is definitely true. Methods of teaching reading, just use phonetics. Word recognition method, we have shown that it is not effective. Students are behind. Phonetic method, they will be ahead, especially if they have enough personal attention. And once they get the phonics down, they can just start reading and they excel. Sight vocabulary, the, it, those words, that's okay, but they have to first start with the phonetic method. And then if you have the phonetics, you can read words you've never seen before. If you know word parts, then you're going to understand the word you just read, even though it might have a prefix, a root, and a suffix. Phonetics. All right, lastly, bilingualism. This is going to help the child's complexity, their cognitive processes. They're going to excel. They are cognitively flexible. Not only do they have these assets, going through school, but they also have the asset of being employable in Arizona, where you do need to be bilingual. What I would say to students, this is our last slide, we're about finished. What I would say to students is, if you don't know a second language, get some flashcards, get Duolingo, get any of these apps, get a free app, and just go through words and learn a fair small vocabulary before you graduate. Just do this to and from school when you're not listening to your textbook. And then write down, yes, I'm bilingual. That way you can get a job. Okay. It's been great doing this for you. I hope you have all the information that you need. We will have a review to prepare before the quiz, and ask questions below.